Hello, family. It's Pearl Coupe again, your host of Ambassador of Change. And we've got an exciting lineup today. We're going to be talking legal things, legalese. You know that this is the program that provokes, inspires, encourages you out there to be a facilitator of change, to bring transformation wherever you go. Everybody has some measure of influence. We're called to be salt, we're called to be light, and this program wants to bring that out in you. Today I have a very special guest with me. He's a friend of mine. His name is Jarro Vogel from Vogel and Associates. Incorporated, okay. So Jarro is going to be talking to me and we're going to be talking about legal issues and the potential of people who are in the legal field to facilitate change in their environment. Welcome, Jarro.
Thank you, Paul, for having us.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor. Now, you and I met a few years ago, and we were both interested in a case. I'm not going to mention the actual case, but really it was a case involving constitutional rights.
And human rights.
And human rights, constitutional rights, and in terms of the right to choice, you know, freedom of religion was another one of the rights that was being discussed, and we met actually in Bloemfontein.
Yes, we did.
Yes, and formed a very nice relationship since then. Now, one of the things I want to first actually ask you, I don't know if you went through this as well, but when I was in law school and even after law school, people always used to ask me this question, which really bugs me. And they would say, how do you reconcile being a Christian and a lawyer? Have you ever been asked that question?
Yeah, because, you know, a lawyer, you know, and
a lawyer.
There's a lot of lawyer jokes and stuff. And
yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know, people have needs and they come to you as a professional person and you need to, within that framework of godly ethics, help that person professionally to a desired outcome at the end of the day. So this is how you balance it. You follow the guidelines that you have in the Word.
Absolutely.
And then you apply it practically to the client's specific set of problems that you need to assist them with.
Yeah,
and that is the golden rule.
Absolutely. And you know what always puzzled me about that question is I always ask people, what Bible were you reading? Because Deborah was a lawyer. Before you can be a judge, you have to be a lawyer. You know, she had a legal background. She was judging. It said she was judging under a palm tree, and palm tree represents righteousness. Paul studied law. So we actually have biblical examples in the Bible of people who studied law. And in fact, there's scriptures that talk about justice and righteousness. So I always say that my job description is actually in the Bible. I don't know about you. So yes, so that's very, very interesting. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, can maybe just share with us your law firm, what areas of law you cover.
Yeah, thanks.
And a little bit about your legal journey.
We were joking about the associate part, but yeah, we're a big associate firm with a national footprint. We do all fields of law. I myself specialize more in property law, family, and then corporate law per se. But we specialize in online legal solutions. Yeah. You know, because people are in need of legal services, they're in need of answers, and they need that within a backdrop of ethics. Yeah. You know, you need an ethical solution to a problem. Yeah. And I think people need to know that wherever you are, there's an ethical way and a non-ethical way of dealing with things. Yeah. And it isn't always like the ethical way is like the hard way where you can almost not attain it. So ethics is very important. Yeah. And when I refer to ethics, it's within the framework of the Bible. You mentioned where you were asking what Bible were they reading. It's quite clear, you know. It's not meant to be very complicated for people at the end of the day. You must love your God before everything else, and then your fellow beings like yourself. Yeah. And within that framework, everything fits in.
Yeah. So righteousness is very, very important, and ethics is very important. I remember in our last year of law school, 5th year LLB, that legal ethics and trust accounts was the course that we had to do. Let's talk a little bit about ethics and maybe talk about some of the unethical things that are unacceptable, not only as a lawyer, but especially as a Christian lawyer.
Well, I think, you know, that depends on the type of client you get. Yeah. Sometimes there would be certain requests clients would like to have transactions, as a simple example, within a corporate backdrop. They would like certain transactions to be condoned, and within the framework of tax law or whatever else, it's not permissible. Then you have to advise a client, listen, this is what the law says, this is a framework, we can help you in this way and that way to your advantage, but this is where the framework is. You can't go beyond that.
Yeah.
And that is where you need to guide a client. And then where the ethics comes in, they need to adhere to your advice. And if they don't want to adhere to your advice, you have to terminate that mandate at the end of the day. Because of a clash of interests. So it is hard from that perspective. But also you can guide the clients to do things the right way so that it would be to their advantage and the advantage of other parties involved. And that win-win situation is normally what we go for. And that is what we try to attain. And for me, that outcome is very positive. You know, to bring life wherever you are. That is what we try to do.
So we've been talking about ethics, and, you know, the Bible puts it differently. One of the things that happened to me is that, you know, God had to really pull me aside and literally show me that he wanted me to represent him in this profession, in this field. But before I could represent him, he said, I need to understand his definition of justice. Because one of the names of God is actually El Mishpat, which means God of justice, God of justice. And one of the things I discovered about justice, according to the way God defines it, he actually puts an ethical perspective to it. And in Psalms 97:2, he says, righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. So that simply means that God's definition and understanding of justice is that there's no justice unless it's accompanied with righteousness. And I wanted us maybe just to talk about that in terms of righteousness and representing righteousness, the opportunities to represent righteousness.
Well, there's a lot of opportunities in that, you know, specifically from the framework of people that are less fortunate, people that are disadvantaged. That can be based on a cultural backdrop, financial backdrop, just a sheer financial dispensation where the persons are in, you know, not to show favoritism to any specific group or entity, but to stand up for what is right. And sometimes you have individuals that are right, but the majority is not so. And then you have to stand up for that individual, whether they are popular or not in that regard. And it happens a lot in corporate settings, unfortunately, where big entities tend to trample on small guys. Let's look at environmental law aspects. A big mine wants to go and mine in an ecological sensitive area. I mean, that's not good, because what heritage are we leaving to our kids? You know, we don't preserve what we are given. Obviously, that has to be outweighed with financial benefit and progress for the country and all that. But there has to be certain areas, like an ecological sensitive area, where you're not supposed to mine. Regardless of the financial needs. What about other needs? The needs of our children to come.
And even health needs, because you know, so many cases whereby the mining actually caused illnesses, serious illnesses.
Like that Wilfontein incident the other day. Yes, and that's irreparable, unfortunately.
And people have died or developed debilitating disease.
So in instances like that, you know, it would be the financial stronghold against the moral stronghold. And then, unfortunately, in that instance, you have to stand strong. You have to. For the greater good for everybody at the end of the day.
No, that's absolutely right. I want us to talk a little bit, have a conversation around potential, because like I said, this program is really around encouraging people in different fields, different professions, to say, you can use your profession. Because one of the things I found, Jarro, which is, I think, not the way God intended it, is that we separate our professional lives from our Sundays. Sundays, we go to a building, we worship, and it seems to be, when we go to work on Monday to Friday, it's like it's a different life. And we don't bring God into the marketplace. And we don't use our offices as an opportunity to effect change. I want us to have a conversation about that as a lawyer, whether you're an advocate or attorney, whatever it is. What are some of the opportunities that we can really use the marketplace to effect change and to bring transformation?
Well, that's an everyday thing.
I'm glad you said
I remember when the master was being scolded by Pharisees for plucking corn on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
He said he was about with his Father's business.
Yeah.
You know, and we have to be about with our Father's business every day.
Yeah.
So it's a practical thing. We have to live it.
Yeah.
Every opportunity, every interaction you have with any person,
Every case.
anywhere, you can make a difference.
Yeah.
So it happens on a case by case basis.
Absolutely.
You know, you are consulting a person, you can see the person's down and out.
Absolutely.
You give them some words of affirmation, some encouragement.
Yes.
You give them good service.
Yeah.
You give them honesty.
Yeah.
And that goes a far way.
Absolutely.
Small trinkets
Absolutely.
is priceless in your
Absolutely.
everyday interaction with people. And that's where it starts. It starts with everyday mundane things, but it has to do with your intention.
Yeah.
And the intention should be to glorify God, live a full life 24/7. That is the aim,
Yeah.
365.
Absolutely.
If you are a committed believer, that is what you ought to strive for.
Yeah, yeah. You remind me of my prosecuting days. I remember one of the things I used to do. Prosecutors now obviously bring criminal cases, and you know the objective is to either find somebody guilty, etc. But now one of the things I remember doing as a prosecutor, because my understanding always as a prosecutor is not necessarily that you have to send a person to jail. But my understanding that as a prosecutor, my job was to present the facts, all the facts to the court, even facts that may be against my case, but to enable the court to come to a proper, whether it was a finding and a sentencing. And one of the things I remember I did very, very often was cases that involved young people, juveniles in particular. And this is when I was still working in Botswana under Attorney General Chambers. Now, Botswana didn't have rehabilitative places where you could send children to juvenile school. And so what would happen is if a juvenile was sentenced, they would end up in a prison with hardened criminals where they could get molested or come out actually worse, having been educated by murderers and people who had raped, etc. So one of the things I always used to do was actually almost represent that juvenile and request for the juvenile to be given into the care of social workers so that they could be rehabilitated. Let's talk a little bit about maybe rehabilitative justice.
Yeah, look, that's a very important factor, especially when it comes into sentencing in criminal matters. I remember in my earlier days when I started out as an attorney, I also did a lot of criminal work back then.
Yeah.
And invariably, you had to deal with a lot of juveniles.
Yeah.
And for me, that was also in that situation, or those situations rather, I felt it very important, the same as you, to try and build something into that young person's character via your interaction with them. Show them that they should take responsibility for what they've done.
Yeah.
They have to turn their lives around. It's a decision of their own free will that they have to do. And then they have to make that decision and then encourage them to make the right decision. And then try and facilitate that process where they can actually learn from the mistake they've made and go out of that situation a better person, not just for themselves, but for the world around them.
Yeah.
So in that regard, it's very, very important to keep those aspects in mind when dealing with those situations. And especially in civil matters as well, people also make mistakes. And to help people through that, to let them, first of all, take responsibility and then try and mediate it as much as possible for them so they can walk out of that situation a better, more well-equipped person.
Yeah.
It's very, very important because there's always a lot of animosity involved with litigation. And I found that a lot of times, unfortunately, people don't take responsibility for their actions.
Yeah.
I'm not saying a person cannot face injustice. It happens often.
Yeah.
But you have to take responsibility for your actions.
Yeah.
And then from there, learn to trust God for the desired outcome.
Yeah.
Versus just to rely on your own strength, your own knowledge, your own means, because that's quite limited, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, there are different ways of legislating and making laws and things like that. You know, we know that Parliament, you can go to Parliament and Parliament passes laws, goes through certain processes, through the committees. Citizens have an opportunity to make submissions, etc. But there's also law that is made through case law. the building up of case law. I want us to have a conversation in terms of how can lawyers actually impact on that in terms of building up of case law and contributing to certain policies and legal thinking, because there's an opportunity there as lawyers, depending on the cases we take, to actually influence the outcomes and the laws that are passed.
Sure, because
and maybe if you have a couple of cases also, maybe you've had an opportunity to do that, share those with us.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Look, the law is a very interesting field of science in itself, because it's a bit not always proactive, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Situations happen and then it needs to be addressed because then they have to make laws.
Yeah.
Simple example of that is people riding on motorcycles without wearing helmets.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was not a prerequisite. Then, unfortunately, there were some accidents back in the day. And there was actually a victim's father that felt it compelled to make it law that people should wear
helmets
and for safety purposes.
Right.
And that saved the lives of a lot of people.
Yeah.
It also affected the health of a lot of people, made the world a better place.
Yeah.
Just one person deciding that, no, man, we need to address this. It can't be like this.
Yeah.
And we can look at different aspects as well, like environmental law, once again.
Yeah.
All aspects of law where you can make things better.
Yeah.
And where you see the need and where the opportunity arises, it can be addressed.
Yeah.
The other day we had a constitutional court matter, obviously because of client privilege, I can't say much.
Right.
But there was a certain aspect of matrimonial property law that needed to be addressed, especially for people that were married within a certain bracket. And we were successful in that application in the Constitutional Court.
Yeah.
And it really made possible change for people on
implications. What are some implications? Yeah.
Well, their rights were restored.
Right.
Where they were discriminated against before.
Right.
And it sounds silly, but we still had it in this country, 30 odd years after democracy.
Yeah.
But then it got changed.
Yeah.
So the small things that can happen.
Yeah.
Just a simple thing is when people are fighting custody issues over children, to encourage people to live and let live. And to create a positive environment of settlement, rather than to put oil on the fire type of thing.
Yeah.
That creates positive change, but on a microcosm in those people's lives, where the children are not exposed to all that animosity, where they can see that people can reconcile regardless of differences they might have, regardless of what happened, regardless of a failed marriage, they can learn from that and go through that thing and not be stuck in it.
Right.
And that's just on a micro scale helping people. And then obviously on policy issues like we've just discussed, that you can, where you see the need and you address issues. I remember back in the day before the Domestic Violence Act was properly enacted, when we still needed to protect the interests of clients, we had to first write a letter to the perpetrator and warn them that they need to desist from harassing or bullying the partner or whatever.
Yeah.
And then from there, you had to go to the High Court and bring a urgent interdict,
Yeah.
And then the aspects of the law of interdict were applicable because the law was not codified in that instance. Yeah. And you will not believe it, in countries like Namibia, for instance, you do not have harassment laws that are properly developed.
Yeah.
So lawyers in that sphere can use that opportunity as an example for how lives can be bettered for people on a practical basis.
Yeah.
But that's very interesting.
Yeah. So one of the things, like I said, I've often met people who want me to justify how I actually can put law and Christianity together. And one of the responses I sometimes give to them is to say that, when I study the Bible, there are categories of people that God says that you must take care of them. And he says, take care of the widows, take care of the fatherless, take care of the strangers. And so what that says to me is that God is very concerned about groups of people who are disadvantaged and groups of people who are vulnerable. Definitely. And I believe that as a lawyer, it gives me that opportunity to represent, like you said, disadvantaged, vulnerable people, people who would not have access to justice, all those things. We actually have a group of young ladies that I mentor called the Deborahs, 972. and I hope I'll be able to bring them on board one day. But they do that. They represent people who've been abused, women who've been abused, gender-based violence, women, attempted trafficking, and they're able to do that, at either no cost or very little cost. And that's one of the things that I really believe we should be doing as lawyers, making sure we're involved in such initiatives.
Definitely, and especially within the ambit of NPOs, non-profit organizations,
Yeah.
where people seek to uplift a local community for a specific cause.
Yeah.
To encourage people like that to take initiative to make a difference where they are, mobilize communities for their own good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many unlimited options that you can opt for, whether it be nature conservation, uplifting people, widows, young children with their educational needs, stuff like that. Poor people, addressing poverty, that you can address, and people that get involved with those type of things can really, really make a difference. And to mobilize people and to help them and advise them. I mean, I'm busy now with the nature conservation thing for an NPO at this stage. Just because they approached me and said, please, we need to conserve these type of animals. This needs to happen. We need to mobilize the community. Nationally, it's not getting enough attention. Please, can you help us? And I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. Because I know it's going to make a change for conservation.
Absolutely.
Because we need it.
Yeah.
We really need all these things in this country. So these are small examples of where you can help people, assist people. And people don't normally usually, I realize that it's legal guys that are sitting behind these organizations, because you need to help them to draft the constitutions, make sure it's legally compliant, make sure all the aspects are covered there so that the organization can run legally. And then from there, they take it further.
Yeah. And I know we recently had a conversation. In fact, I was sharing with you some projects, and there were some projects in Malawi, et cetera, helping widows. And in fact, you were saying, oh, we love our law firm to get involved in that. And are those some of the initiatives that you as a law firm really would like to get involved in? Giving back to community?
Definitely.
What are your views on that, just the giving back to community?
We have to give back to community, and we have to empower people to make a change. The only way we're going to have a change in the world, in this country where we are, is to help people around us.
Absolutely.
Because we are the cavalry. We are the help to our fellow human beings. We can't just shut our eyes and hope that somebody else will do it or government will do it. I mean, we have to be the change.
We're the active citizens. And I want you just on this point, really just to look at the camera and encourage our fellow lawyers, because I always tell people this. I said, I had such a different picture when I went to law school. I was imagining, I was so vain. I was imagining myself driving a Lambo or a Ferrari or something, out there. And now I'm driving a Haval. But anyway, but I had all these grandiose, I'm going to be in court and I'm going to wear, the robes and the bibs. And I mean, it was just this whole thing, and it completely turned out differently, where now I'm more of a community activist and working in the nations, working with widows and orphans and things like that. But I want you to just, as we have an opportunity, Jarro, as lawyers, to encourage our fellow lawyers out there to say, it's not about the Lamborghini. It's not about the Ferrari. It's not about British English or, fancy Latin in court, but God has put you in this very privileged position that you can use to facilitate change in the community. Just last 2 minutes that we have.
Right. Yeah, I would like to, definitely, to all my fellow colleagues out there, hope you're well. Yeah, and hats off to you for practicing in these challenging times, under these challenging circumstances. Wherever you are, you can make a difference. You don't have to be perfect. I'm definitely not perfect, but we can be light bearers. We can make a difference where we are. Doesn't matter who you help, how you help them, but the mere fact that you are there and willing to care about another person, to solve their problems and to help them find a positive resolve is amazing. And I'd like to encourage you guys to do it, to keep on doing it. Bring the light where you are. Nobody necessarily always sees you, but the word says, the right hand shouldn't know always what the left hand is doing. So do it. I mean, we don't do it for recognition from people necessarily, or for monetary compensation, although we have to do our businesses. But do what you guys can where you can, and keep up the good work, really. hats off to all of you. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Jarro. It's been a
Thank you,
pleasure
Prof.
having you. You heard it here on Ambassador of Change. You may be in the legal field. You may not necessarily need to be a lawyer. You may be a magistrate. You may be a judge. You may be a legal secretary. But there's an opportunity for you to be an instrument, a vessel, a channel of change. So many opportunities just by counseling somebody that you may actually be talking to, representing the disadvantaged, representing the vulnerable, encouraging them, helping them in some way, going out into the community, taking a CSI project, and going out there, corporate social investment project, and helping build the nation. But there are opportunities, changing the law, bringing aspects of righteousness and making sure that the law is changed to benefit the disadvantaged and those who are vulnerable. So you've heard it from me and from Jarro. As your lawyer Christians, we are encouraging you and we're saying, let's get together and let's make a difference in our legal field. Ginako, it's time. Hashtag Ambassador of Change. Hashtag Leave a Legacy. God bless you.